Let's sort of get the ready to dive right in. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that McNally Robinson is located here on Treaty 1 territory. That's the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, in the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are so pleased that you could all join us here tonight, both in person and virtually on YouTube, as we are so happy to be celebrating the launch of the battle cry of the Siamese Kitten. Even more tales from the accidental veterinarian, Philipp Schott. We're always thrilled whenever we have an opportunity to work with Philipp. We've launched his two novels, with the novel The Willow Wren and his recent mystery 54 Pigs here at the store, and particularly pleased to be launching yet another accidental veterinarian book as well, as they are a delight. And we have a wonderful host here to carry on a conversation with Philipp as well. I'll be introducing both of them in just a moment. Unacceptable host here to come. But no, we're thrilled to have you all here. And I just have a few brief housekeeping notes just beforehand. So there'll be a reading from Philipp from the podium here, and then we'll move along to a conversation, which will take place at these chairs to my left. And then following that, there'll be an opportunity for you folks to ask questions. So what I will do for those people here is I will run up to you, Sally, Jesse, Raphael style, and thrust a microphone into your face. Please be assured this is not an attack, and it's not any comment on whether or not you can project your voice. It's just to ensure that those people watching on YouTube now or in the future can hear your question as well. Now, if you are watching on YouTube and have a question for Philipp, please feel free to write it into the chat, and we'll put them to him as time permits. Following the event, we'll move along to the signing, but I'll leave all the signing procedure for the end so that you have something dramatic to look forward to. Your author tonight, Philipp Schott, grew up in Saskatoon, where he studied veterinary medicine. He is now chief of staff at a large pet hospital in Winnipeg. He lives with 3 humans and 4 animals in a creaky old house on the river. The Battle Cry of the Siamese Kitten is his 5th book, and that is 5th book, the 3rd in the Accidental Veterinarian series. And as I mentioned earlier, he wrote an incredible historical novel, The Willow Wren, based on family experiences in the war, and also very warmly received cozy mystery, 54 Pigs, both of which we would highly recommend. Your host this evening, Doug Speirs, humor column in the Doug House, appeared in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press at least 3 times. We have a moment of public revelation, which is always wonderful.
I told you.
Starting
Thank you for that. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Oh, absolutely.
You had to have the Sally and Jesse Raphael reference.
So it appeared in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press at least 3 times a week starting in 2006. No one is exactly sure why. In his irreverent columns, Doug strived to focus on the vital issues of the day, but generally ended up writing about himself and his family, especially his 2 dogs, because he isn't overly fond of getting out of bed or leaving the house. He was a finalist at the 2008 National Newspaper Awards for column writing, and in 2017 in the Project of the Year category for the class of 2017, wherein he chronicled a single class of students from kindergarten to grade 12 graduation. He and his wife, she who must not be named, have 2 children, neither of whom think he is the least bit funny. Doug retired at the end of October, though he continues to write a weekly column for Saturday's paper and is now focused on the most important phase of his life, being a grandfather. Now, we'll be hearing more from Doug shortly, but for now, I'll invite you all to join me in welcoming Dr. Philipp Schott.
All right. Okay, thank you all for coming. The Battle Cry of the Siamese Kitten. The title is clickbait. It's the book version of clickbait. It's not all about Siamese kittens, but to satisfy that, I will read that particular chapter. So there's 60 chapters, 60 disconnected stories, all pretty random in random alphabetical order, but we may as well read from the Battle Cry of the Siamese Kitten. While it is true that the great majority of pets labeled as aggressive are actually just scared, I have my doubts about Supercat. The screaming began the moment I entered the exam room. Mr. Charles was a tall, thin man with a bright smile and a firm handshake. Sorry about that, doctor, he said, still smiling. Supercat doesn't like strangers. Oh, that's okay. He's probably just nervous. It happens all the time. Supercat was a new patient, and I hadn't checked the file before entering the room. So I was surprised to see a small Siamese kitten glaring at me from inside his travel carrier. From the volume and intensity of the screeching, I expected a much larger animal, but he looked like he weighed under a kilo, or not quite 2 pounds. How old is he? About 8 weeks. He's beautiful. He really was beautiful. He was a classic seal point with dark brown ears, nose, feet, and tail tip, offset by a cream-colored body and extraordinary sapphire eyes. And he was mad. Not scared, mad. A scared kitten will scream at you from the back of the carrier while cowering. Supercat lunged at the bars as I approached. He opened his mouth so wide when he screamed that his whole face seemed to consist only of mouth. His eyes squeezed shut to little slits. Should I get him out? Mr. Charles asked. Sure, please. He'll probably be better once he doesn't feel cornered in there. I doubted this was true, but I felt it was my duty to be optimistic. Mr. Charles gingerly opened the carrier's door while making quiet cooing noises. Supercat shrieked at him and tried to swat his hand. Ooh, he's really mad today. He pulled his hand back. Here, let me try. I don't know why I said that. If Supercat was willing to attack the literal hand that feeds, how did I honestly think he'd react to my hand? I suppose it was my cheerful, I got this doctor persona betraying me again. As I leaned forward, Supercat put his ears back flat and stared at me with an intensity that signaled a level of hatred 2 steps beyond loathing. He was quiet in that moment, but I could sense his battle cry gathering strength within. Each of his tiny muscles was fully tensed. I did all the right things. I avoided direct eye contact. I moved ever so slowly, and I spoke in soft, soothing tones. Supercat let out an ear-piercing caterwaul and leapt forward, smacking my hand with a velocity that made his paws blur. It was like watching Rocky Balboa go after a punching bag with the video speed sped up 10 times. I pulled my hand back as if I had touched a hot stove. He had his claws out. There are 4 parallel red lines on the back of my hand, each beginning to sport tiny red beads of blood. Wow, he's fast, I said. He sure is. Are you okay? Oh yeah, just a flesh wound, I chuckled. But it did sting, and I wasn't keen to repeat the experience. This was quite a few years ago, before most carriers were designed to have their tops taken off easily, so that was not an option. Plan B was a gravity-assisted exit from the kennel. I explained this to Mr. Charles and then gradually began tilting up the back of the kennel. Supercat yelled like he was being dumped into bubbling lava, but he did not emerge. I kept tilting it up until eventually the kennel was fully vertical, its door swinging open above the exam table. Supercat had starfished himself across the entrance. He was not coming out. Mr. Charles and I looked at each other and shrugged. Okay, on to Plan C then, I said. Plan C was a tech, veterinary nurse with extra heavy-duty leather gloves. I went into the treatment area where the 4 techs were working on various things and called out in a happy sing-song voice, "Who likes gorgeous fluffy kittens?" 4 hands shot in the air. "Who likes gorgeous fluffy kittens?" "Who channels Satan?" 4 hands dropped, but there was a reluctant volunteer. "How bad can it be?" she asked. I just grinned wickedly. The gloves probably weighed more than the kitten, but they were effective. The kennel was large enough that the tech could reach her armored hands in and corral all of Supercat's flailing limbs. Getting him out of the kennel was only the first battle, though. We did manage to weigh him, and I think I heard his heart on the stethoscope between amplified screams. But the rest of the exam was cursory at best. I was able to give him his vaccine, which he didn't seem to notice as he was too busy gnawing on the gloves like a beaver on a log. He even fought us going back into the kennel. It was clear that he was after a decisive victory, not just an uneasy draw. At least he was now officially a patient in the system. I could prescribe happy pills for him for his next visit. For the record, the happy pills did not work. On his next visit, Supercat was more like a drunk screaming and fighting, but definitely still screaming and fighting. Over the years, we saw him as little as possible. Fortunately, he was a very healthy cat. The angriest ones usually are. Incidentally, on the cover, that's not the cat or my cat. That's the publisher just found that somewhere.
Thank you. I'll begin by saying that Philip and I exchanged friendly emails before tonight, just to kind of introduce ourselves, and he apologized to me because anybody who knows me knows I'm an infamous dog owner and forged a career in newspapers by writing about my dogs, so I'm not that proud of it. But he apologized that I would have to introduce a book with a kitten on the cover. But I was thrilled to tell him, and I'll tell you guys, that for 2 weeks now, I am now a cat owner. My daughter moved back to town from Ontario and is living with us along with Cheddar. I don't know how old he is. I think he's a very young cat. And, you know, today I was at the pet store buying cat treats and a little Christmas llama that if you pull his tail, vibrates. And my wife's looking at me going, "You're a cat lover." And I guess I am. So are there different kinds of people? Are dog people and cat people very different people?
No. So, you know, again,
This could be a long night if
Yeah,
based on that.
so again and again, is this on? There, I just need to be closer. There we go. Again and again, I've had people declare that they are dog people and not interested in cats, or vice versa. And then through some quirk of fate, the dog person is presented with a cat, or the cat person is presented with the dog. And then the statement is usually, I'm a dog person, and I make an exception for this cat. All the other cats are terrible, but this cat is particularly.
Well, some of them are terrible. Like we looked after a cat that hid under our bed and would wait for you to walk past, and then one paw would reach up, just rake across your ankles. So I didn't particularly like that cat. But Cheddar, our new cat,
There you go. So you made an
I
exception.
get all misty eyed. So sorry, I'm now a cat lover. So you, speaking of love, one of the things that caught me in the book is the reason you came to Winnipeg. You came in 1990.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, see, I read the book.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for professional reasons.
No.
You came here for love.
I did.
Can you-
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
my wife is somewhere in the room. Not necessarily in the front row. No, she was from Winnipeg. I was from Saskatoon, grew up in Saskatoon. Was kind of at loose ends at the end of vet school. Didn't want to go into practice, thought maybe research, but I had a lot of debt at that point. Student debt, okay, could work a little. And Lorraine really wanted to come back to Winnipeg where her family was from. And so I'll try Winnipeg for a year.
If I knew, I would play out the story that you moved here for love. So because everybody's like, oh, so sweet. So no, I mean, you come through as an incredibly likable person in this. So
Well,
is he actually? Is he nice?
The number of layers of editorial editing that this goes through to create that persona.
Well, I mean, this is the things that you say. You're quite open in the book about your feelings, and when you read this, you'll laugh. You'll cry. There's bits. So you're nodding. Have you read it? Did you cry?
2/3, yeah. Actually, I was teary.
Yeah, like there's some stories in there that and I'm a crier. I'm sitting. I'm reading your book late at night with 2 dogs in the bed and my wife there, and she's, "What's wrong with you?" So you have the ability to. And you talk about the emotions that you go through. That you don't say it's like a roller coaster ride. You say it's more like a slot machine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Explain what you mean.
The emotional slot machine. I mean, and this is something I try to explain to students when we have students come in, something to be prepared for. And there are other professions like that. Veterinary medicine isn't necessarily special that way, but it's intense. So I won't move from one room where I've just put a pet to sleep. And this is, that's always a terrible thing. It's extra terrible if I've known the people for sometimes a couple of generations now. Having been there 32 years, I've known the animal since, dog or cat, since it was a puppy or a kitten. So it's really hard. They're crying, I'm crying, pet's dead. And now I go across the hall, and so that's slot machine crying eyes. So to explain the metaphor, sorry. Instead of I've never played slots, I don't know what other stars and hearts and stuff like that, whatever, there's cherries. They're in the emotional slot machine, we have emoji. So you pull and you've got crying eyes. You go across the hall, and 30 seconds later, deep breath, and you walk in, and because you know it's a new puppy and it's a young couple and it's their first pet and they're overjoyed, and you better express some of that joy too. So it's going to be laughing face, and then you go into the next one after that, and it's a client that's really angry about something, something that didn't go well, or the bill was too high, or that sort of thing, and it's just one after another, and you have to continually adjust your emotional state, and consequently, the burnout rate is extremely high in our profession, in part because of that.
Because of just
Pull this way, pull that way, yeah. It's every emotion. I mean, we even get the poo emoji, which isn't an emotion, but on the
that I'm not surprised about. I'm guessing you go through a lot of tissues.
We go through a lot of tissues, yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah, we go through a lot of tissues. I mean, it's we just finished a room at the back of the clinic that's more or less specifically for euthanasia. I mean, it's kind of a horrifying, not horrifying, it's just the facts of life.
No, it's something you have to do.
12 to 16 years, and you've got, I don't know, we've got 10, 15,000 patients, and you just do the math on that.
And in the book, you cry a couple of times in the book, so you're a softie.
Oh yeah.
I'm guessing
Crusty softie.
You actually do like animals.
I do like animals, yes.
By falling off that horse.
When I was a child, yeah. No, I grew up in a non-pet household. So that's why the first book was The Accidental Veterinarian. I didn't really have that abstract knowledge of what a veterinarian was, but my parents, they weren't hostile to it. It just wasn't part of our cultural milieu. That's a good word.
Which makes it strange that you became a vet.
Yeah. So well, I mean, the story there is in The Accidental Veterinarian, and one of the first chapters I talk about how the end of grade 12, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I had a lot of different interests.
You describe it like you're going through, okay, I can be an archaeologist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then you kind of went through the whole thing in the last one, like the vet, okay.
Yeah, pretty
Why
much.
not?
Yeah, no, it was a course. It was an actual literal catalog that we had for the University of Saskatchewan, a paper catalog for you young people there. And you go through it alphabetically, and the arrogance of the typical 18-year-old, lame, I'm not going to do that. In my head, it said, careful about the things where doesn't actually produce a career. So in German, we call it a brotlose Kunst, a breathless art.
Okay.
So
spell it for us later.
I dismissed all this stuff, and it got to near the end. It was theology. Oh no, there'll be something after this, and veterinary medicine. I didn't have an objection. I liked animals, and I thought.
But you like animals, but not necessarily all animals. I understand now if you go to the clinic, that there are sort of standing orders that Dr. Philipp will see anything provided it is not a parrot.
Yeah, I won't see parrots.
So I probably should explain. I have my own issues with birds that have playing Santa for the Humane Society, and they warn you that, okay, this bird has a beak that will break your arm. And you're like, oh, okay, take it away.
Pretty much that.
Tell us, that's why you have the parrot sensitivity.
Well, there's a couple of big reasons. One is that reason. They're dangerous. I don't understand them. I've never really spent any time to understand them, never really studied them, spent time around them. And you just Google on YouTube, parrot bites off finger. Search that one if you're bored tonight. When you come out. It happens.
That would make a little
and they are very specialized from a medical standpoint. So there's all kinds of weird diseases. Everything else within mammals, I can extrapolate. You can bring me whatever, name something. Capybara, sloth,
Snake? Have you done the snake?
I've done snakes, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. For ultrasound.
And now you ultrasound snakes.
I've ultrasound snakes.
Okay, that is a strange job.
Yeah.
Did you bring a snake to him, or you're nodding?
No, I helped with
Do you work in the clinic with him?
I sure do. That's
So-
why I'm here. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
noticed he didn't speak up when I was asking whether he was actually a nice guy.
I went like this.
That's the appropriate thing. Yes. Yeah, no, a 6-meter python, ball python.
Oh my God, yeah.
A couple 100 pounds, required 5 employees to carry it like this. Brian,
I do not.
it was all curled up under an Afghan in the back of an old K car.
And then they sell the car and somebody's like, oh, what's it?
But the problem is that it's just a long tubular structure, so it's really difficult to figure out where anything is. But that's okay. They move slowly. Yes, you think it's dangerous, but if you have to have something wrong with you, you can be killed by a python. They move very, very slowly. But
Oh, so
but
you're
birds
blaming
move
the
fast.
person that gets killed by the plane.
I
It's
do,
your
yes.
fault. You're right. You're gonna move quicker.
Exactly. But parrots, they move fast. And,
So-
and their owners are usually pretty sophisticated. They usually know a lot about parrots, and so yeah, it's like thanks, but thanks.
Yeah, no, I'm with you totally on that. You know what? When I met you, and I'll ask this question. I grew up reading James Herriot.
Right.
Everybody knows James Herriot. Look at them all down. Oh yes, I'm just warm and fuzzy. I love those books. I love the TV shows. I love the remake that they did. And the first thing that struck me was that you seem like, you know, Winnipeg's own modern day James Herriot. And I think your answer to that was no.
No. Yeah, I mean,
What up with that?
different times, right? 90 years ago, he's a better veterinarian, better human being, better writer probably than I am, and all this. And maybe I'm being modest, of course, but truly, you know, I mean, so when I started going to vet school, you must have read James Herriot. James who? so I went and I got James Herriot book, and I was terrified.
Oh, did you read him? You have
Yeah,
since
I
read
did.
it?
I read that for him a couple of times since once when I started in vet school. I said, my God, this is really hard work. I'm not sure if I'm up to that. And I don't work nearly as hard as he does. Most modern vets don't, other than in the country they do. But in the city, we're pretty spoiled, really. So,
Well, it's not just
that.
having the right answer for what's wrong with an animal, it's also dealing with the emotions of that must be equally as hard, dealing with, you know,
Harder.
people like me that come in with, you know.
Harder, yeah, no, it's absolutely, it's harder. Yeah, everything else, you can look it up, you can stall for time or something like that to come up with an answer and figure things out medically. That you can learn. Humans, that's really tough, human emotion, you know. And that's another thing I tell students is this is not an animal business that happens to involve people. This is a people business that happens to involve animals. And if you're not comfortable dealing with all kinds of different people in different emotional states, you're going to burn out really fast. You're going to get stressed out really fast. So that's the truth of it for sure. I flipped it around by writing about the crazy animals.
No, we can't call it this because you have a cat. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're.
No, early on, I found it kind of fascinating. I ended up derailing my thoughts of going into research and so on, because I found I was really looking forward to seeing my clients and the patients, of course, too, but seeing the clients. So.
Think about how boring your books would have been had you gone into research.
Oh, yeah.
And then the DNA we examined was.
pretty much, yeah.
No, I think you're perfect in the world of emotion. Speaking of writing, which we are in that, this is the third book in the Accidental Vet series.
Yeah.
And you also have, taking a moment, 54 Pigs, your first murder mystery.
Right.
Which my book club just read. So,
Oh.
yeah, I know. So I got them like 12 sales.
Double my sales.
Yeah, everybody enjoyed it. So you have to write something nice in this for me. You're nicer than the vet in the book, though.
I suppose.
Do you have people told you that, or am I the first?
Yeah, so I think he's been described as an extreme version of me.
Okay.
So some of my traits, but taken to an extreme
There
extent.
you go. So.
Yeah. He's so it's interesting because in this book I don't out him for what he is. He's neurodiverse.
Yes.
He's a high functioning autism spectrum individual. So I left that out because I didn't want to label him. I thought, you know, let people figure this out for themselves or not. I want neurodiversity to be considered part of the mainstream, just like people come in different sizes. You're taller than I am.
You noticed.
Right? so we're different shapes.
You're much more handsome though. First thing I'm looking at, I'm going, oh, handsome. You would play yourself.
All right, we're going to move on.
I hope that didn't creep out your wife too much.
Yeah. So, humans come in different shapes, right? So physically, but our brains come in different shapes too. And yet we apply judging labels to that. So I didn't want that. But in the review, the review has been more or less positively reviewed, but some of the negative ones just from individual readers are how much they didn't like the protagonist. And I thought, okay, fair, you don't have to like him, but I wonder if they understood him a little better, that maybe that would turn things. So in Six Ostriches, the sequel that's coming out in May, there is a reference. Just slip it in there that, Asperger's, there we go.
And that's not the okay, so there's like, this is the third of the Accidental Vet series.
Yep.
You've got 2 more, I think, kind of in the pipeline coming out for this.
Yeah.
Plus you wrote the book about your dad growing up in
The
Nazi
Willow
Germany.
Yeah.
So that's, how many books is that? That's like 8 books.
5 that are out, the 2 more coming.
And you're a full-time vet. You're only
not full-time. No. 3 days a week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
just 3 days.
in my world, that's more than full-time. Well, you're a practicing veterinarian.
Yeah.
And you're 55?
57.
57, okay. Let's see. Look, 55.
Thank you.
But that many books, like I'm 66. I was like a writer for 40 years. I have 1 book. And that book was basically a collection of columns that I wrote because I had to. So what's the deal? Are you a veterinarian who writes, or a writer who also, just for fun, does veterinary medicine on animals? So
it's the former that's probably gradually transitioning to the latter. Veterinarian who writes on the side, but more and more writing, less and less veterinarian.
So what was wrong with you that you felt compelled to write? Because I'm guessing you did. You felt something that you made you do this.
So I always have written at some level, and published a few magazine things back in the 90s on outdoor stuff like hiking and so forth, and ran a blog I still do, write a blog about Scotch whiskey. Nobody reads.
I like you so much more now.
And travel blog, we do travel blogs, there's a million out there, right? So, and I always have kept this kind of firewall between my personal life and my professional life as a veterinarian. And, veterinary medicine is this beast that could eat your life if you wanted to. And certainly I have colleagues for whom they live and eat and breathe veterinary medicine. Okay, fantastic, more power to them, but I'm not that. I don't want to be that. So I always kept that separate, and I realized that people were not interested in hearing about whiskey, and they were not interested in hearing about travel. They were most people, but they were interested in hearing about my vet stories. So I thought, okay, my entree into the publishing world would be to write my vet stories, and sure enough, and girded my loins, as this expression goes, to for the hundreds of rejections that you're supposed to get and so forth. And in 20 minutes of sending the manuscript out, the editor wrote back, said, yeah. It's just luck. Honestly, it's just luck, and I can tell you that
stories like that do make me hate you more.
I'm getting to the part where I explain why it's luck. The editor's wife, just absolute blind luck. The editor's wife is a veterinarian.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that happened to land on his desk.
Okay.
So it happened to be in a sympathetic frame of mind.
What's your wife's occupation?
She's also a vet.
Oh, a surprise! It's an insular world that we live in. So my wife is not a columnist. You may be surprised. There would not be room for both our heads in the same house.
We don't work in the same practice, though. That wouldn't work.
Are you writing anything at the moment? So.
No. Nothing will be published.
But you do name her in the book. I don't think you named the kids.
Probably not. And one of them is dedicated to them, so their names do crop up, but no, I don't. They're not. It's hard to read them on how they feel about my writing profession. Mostly it's squirming and avoiding glances.
This sounds weird, but I sort of, as I read it, I thought, oh, this is me. this was me. If I was smarter and had gone to veterinary school, this would be me. And when you said the Scotch thing, I'm thinking, whoa, this is kind of like alarming. So if I was like 150 pounds lighter and dressed better, I could be you. It probably would, yeah, you probably would, yeah, it would not, there would be a lot of mishaps in the clinic. So, but do you think of yourself? There's a lot of humor in the books. Like there's some stuff where I laughed out loud, you know, like I'm amazed you're still married. With any writer who openly describes his wife's labor pains as being identical to
Why not the role?
to a beagle experiencing, you know, something, what is it, beagle pain syndrome?
Oh yeah, beagle pain
You
syndrome.
know, like, and you're still married? That's pretty good. So.
Yeah, she's pretty tolerant too.
But you still look after beagles though, right?
I do look after. I like beagles actually. Beagles are comical. They're inherently comical.
But we looked after 2 beagles. One of my first columns was right about the devil beagles from hell.
Oh yeah.
who destroyed a glass tabletop and pooped in my shoes. And, you know, anyway, this isn't about me, but just like I shared that, like, you know, sort of discomfort with parrots and beagles.
So there you go. So that's why cat people will use those sort of stories like to explain why dogs are inferior, right? So there's always going to be exceptions in each species. So
Now, will you pick a side?
No,
Absolutely.
no. So I was a gerbil person to start. My first pet. What are you gonna do?
Was that your first gerbil?
Gerbil, yeah, Bobo.
But before that, you were in love with a dog in Germany.
That's right. My cousin's dog.
Yes.
Tito. Yeah, Tito, Black Cocker Spaniel. Yeah.
And that kind of, it sounds like Tito, as much as anything, kind of led you into the career.
In part, yeah. So I had this a real fascination for dogs. I've got this kind of categorizing kind of mind. So I had to memorize all the dog breeds. I had this A to Z dog breed book. And I think there's a story in there about that. So I memorized all the dog breeds, even though I know
the first chapter of the book. So.
Okay, there you go. I didn't, even though I knew I didn't have I didn't have a hope of ever getting a dog while I was at home. My parents were just not interested. So I considered myself a theoretical dog person, actual dog person. Every few years when we went to Germany to visit family, but in reality, a gerbil person, like a gerbil. And then we got a cat. A cat just showed up. This is in the first book. No, the gerbil had gone to gerbil heaven at that point, or gerbil hell for him probably. I'm not sure. But the cat we lived on the acreage outside Saskatoon, and a cat showed up on the acreage. And my parents were more anti-cat than they were anti-dog even. So it was, okay, the cat can be in the garage, the unheated garage, but that's it. So a week later, the cat can be in the heated garage, but not the house. You know where this is going. So a week, and this is my dad. My dad is a German physics professor. Was. The cat, it's getting very cold. Even the garage is not so nice. So the cat can come in the house.
Is that an impression of your dad?
It is. It's a terrible impression of my dad.
I'm not doing it.
But not in the bed. And then one day I come home from school. My dad's been home alone, and I hear this weird noise upstairs. I said, "Oh, Dad having a stroke? What's going on?" I go upstairs, and there he is on his hands and knees playing with the cat in his bed. So they became cat people, and so I became a cat person.
How it's happened. Maybe it's an aging thing that we, I don't know. Maybe 20 years ago I wouldn't have loved a cat,
But then eventually I got a dog. 10 years ago, my daughter badgered us, and I got a dog. And it's a lab? It's a Sheltie sheepdog. Yeah,
okay, I wasn't even close. And his name is
Orbit.
Orbit,
yeah, because
named after those garbage things.
You got it. Yeah,
seriously,
there's very few people that actually gets that.
I can tell you an interesting story.
Put your trash in
Put
orbit.
your trash in orbit. Exactly.
He rates the garbage and stuff. So.
Well,
We did when he was a puppy.
He's a puppy. He rated everything.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to know that veterinarians don't have better dogs than the rest of us.
Oh no, he's terrible. He's
He's
terrible. He's lovely, right? He's became a dog person once I got him, a dog person and a cat person and a gerbil person. But objectively, he's kind of terrible. Shelties are supposed to be smart. He's beautiful.
The terrible ones make better stories, right?
They do.
The good ones, you know, like
In the second book, there's a story called Mr. Barky Barkerson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That explains it.
It'd be hard for me to pick out which story I like the best. And they're so easily, you describe them as being snacks, like literary snacks, because they're all kind of short. You can just kind of pop one in and read. So it's perfect bathroom reading. So
Right.
I read 90% of the things I read in the bathtub. So this is absolutely awesome bathtub reading. So
Good.
and when I do read, I got the one dog we have one little white dog. He's blind now, and just when he went blind, and he's diabetic, so he's almost the same as me. You know, I've been diabetic for years, so I've got the insulin, and now I actually have double vision because of the experience. So like, there's about 400 of you as far as so it's good for the crowd now.
Yeah.
But I have no idea where I'm going with. Let's see if we can come up with a question out of this. We do very soon. We're going to go into audience questions. So you guys and if you don't ask questions, you won't be allowed to leave the store. So that's, I checked with them. They said, yeah, that's fair to do. So what do you think I should ask you?
You should ask me.
You're an easy interview.
Am I? Oh, good.
You are very easy.
Okay.
I started out bad with the dramatic no. Not go there. Do not ask. Okay, now I'm sorry, it slipped into an offensive accent. So.
No, that's all right.
That part out for online.
On behalf of Germans, it's okay. We're all right with that. You can ask me about the leopard. People want to hear about the leopard.
Oh, that was the baby leopard?
Yeah, the snow leopard. Yeah.
That kind of had a nice little touching edit. You have I'm guessing you probably the endings of these pieces because they're like columns. It's exactly like what I do.
Okay.
Except like I'm reading this going, oh, he's a good writer. And this one's really good too. And then, oh, I hate this guy because like you sweat over these things and like coming up with endings is horrible. Yeah. Sometimes you need the ending first before you can start writing.
Right. Yeah.
Is that how you do? Do you have endings before that kind of like that big thought?
So in these stories, no, not necessarily. Certainly for the novels, I have a very clear vision of how I want it to end and how I want it to begin. Like visually, I see it. And then I just have to kind of connect that, the middle bit. But these little stories, not necessarily, just kind of.
Snow Leopard, do you want to read the Snow Leopard one?
I could read the Snow
Would
Leopard.
you like him to read the Snow Leopard one too?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, come on, can we be? Yes! Okay, hands up, anyone here who has examined a snow leopard, other than people who work with them. Anybody else? You've examined a baby snow leopard? No? Then I think you need to read
All
this.
right. It's interesting though.
It was one of my favorites, and I really like the ending for some reason.
Maybe I should. Is this? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Now we got to find it, but it's alphabetic, so I just have to remember how I titled it though.
Is it actually in alphabetical order?
The book is in alphabetical order, yeah.
I did not.
Yeah. So the first one was organized by category. I had this like the art of veterinary medicine, the science of veterinary medicine, becoming a veterinarian, something like that. The second one was by species, dogs, cats, others. And then this one, I couldn't come up with a system, so it's just alphabetical. And so some reviewers said, oh, it flows so nicely. It's completely random. And I gotta actually find it. It's called. Let's see here. The Heart of the Leopard. That's it. Here we go. Heart of the Leopard. So it's ironic because it actually echoes some of the stuff about the Siamese kitten. So it's going to sound sort of similar because we've got another small, fierce, cute thing. So the second small, fierce, cute thing. Every child has a favorite animal. In my case, there were several. I couldn't settle on just one or rank them, lest it make the runners-up feel bad. How they would know about their rank, let alone understand or care, was not a question I thought to examine. My menagerie of favorites was almost entirely populated by the quirky and the odd. Platypuses, kiwis, yaks, beavers, llamas, and the like. I'm not sure why this was, but there was one more traditional pick as well, the snow leopard. It wasn't because it was such a beautiful animal, as, given the foregoing list, looks obviously didn't register with me. Instead, it had something to do with its solitude and mysteriousness. The fact that it was so powerful but had almost never been seen in the wild made a big impression on me. This impression was cemented when, as a teenager, I read Peter Matthiessen's classic, The Snow Leopard, in which the author goes to Nepal in search of the animal, but it behaves like a ghost, more a presence felt than something he could see. Cool. Fast forward 10 years to my move to Winnipeg in 1990 and my first visit to the zoo. The Assiniboine Park Zoo had an astonishing collection of animals, including, you guessed it, snow leopards, among its 3 varieties of extremely rare Asian leopards. These were not ghosts, but gorgeous flesh and blood creatures only meters away. There were 2 in the cage, draped over wooden platforms, lounging, swishing their magnificent tails back and forth, completely ignoring me as I gawped. By this point in my life, I was much more impressed by beauty than I had been as a child. It was hard to imagine a more beautiful animal. Fast forward again, this time 30 years, to a phone call from the zoo vet. Could I possibly come to the zoo and perform an ultrasound on one of their snow leopard cubs? Normally they would bring the animal to me, but as the cub was small, they didn't want him away from his mother for very long. Could I? Are you kidding me? Could I ever? However, I kept my professional demeanor intact and asked her to wait a moment while I checked my calendar. Perfunctory checking done, I agreed. The cub had had some odd breathing episodes and there was a history of heart disease in his family, so they wanted to be absolutely sure that he was okay. On the appointed day, my wife Lorraine, also a vet, who came along as an assistant and was, if anything, more excited than I was, drove up to a secure gate at the side of the zoo complex where we were met by the zoo vet and directed to follow her van. We took a winding route behind the enclosures until we came to the back of the snow leopard area. Lorraine was positively vibrating with excitement. I kept fending off paranoid thoughts that I'd forgotten some important part of my ultrasound machine as I'd never used it away from the clinic before. We were ushered into a small wooden building and shown a metal exam table against one wall where I could set up my equipment. While I was fussing with the settings, I heard a gasp from Lorraine. The snow leopard cub had arrived. One of the zookeepers had carried him in from an adjacent building attached to their pen. She cradled him tightly in her arms, leather gauntlets protecting her hands. There's the leather gauntlets again, parallel story. He was stunning. He stared at us unblinking with pale blue eyes. He was 2 months old and he weighed as much as an adult house cat, even though he appeared to be roughly double the size of one. Yes, that's how fluffy he was. If the thought of a fluffy snow leopard cub that you can cradle in your arms doesn't already put you into a diabetic coma of cuteness, then consider the sounds he makes. This adorable blunt bundle of fluff is a leopard, and he knows it. He knows that he is supposed to be a wild and fierce thing, so he made wild and fierce sounds at us. Grr, grr, grr. Take it from me. Nothing is as cute as something trying to be ferocious when it is manifestly not ferocious. At least not very ferocious. They did wear those heavy leather gloves after all. The zookeeper said that they could continue to handle him like this without sedation until about 6 months of age. The ultrasound itself was anticlimactic, in a good way. When an ultrasound is exciting, it's because something is wrong. Nobody wants that. The room was darkened. The leopard growled quietly, and we watched a black and white image come flickering to life on my screen. It was the heart of a leopard, and its beat was strong. That's it.
I told you that was a good one.
It's not actually my favorite story, not by a long shot, but it's my favorite episode. Like I said, meeting the snow leopard.
So you're mad at me for getting you to read that story?
No, I love it. Love the snow leopard. Yeah, I love that.
Well, I mean, how many of us in our daily life get to ultrasound a goldfish or listen to the heart of a snow leopard or all the kind of the weird and wonderful things
If I'd gone into research,
that you get to do? No, you would not have done. Thank God you didn't. You would have dumb idea. What were you thinking? You weren't thinking.
it was kind of wasn't thinking.
See, I could have been your dad. I just don't have the right accent for it. No, but you come through. Like I'm so happy. I really am happy to be here tonight because I was so after reading this, I was just so excited to meet you. Again, that sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? But you know, because you're an extremely good writer. You really are. I mean, I appreciate the craft of what goes into it, and it's harder to write short. You know, it's much easier. Like the easiest columns I write are the ones where I just blather away, and you write like paragraphs that never end. Right. That's easy, sloppy writing. But you write very tight, very short, and you pack a lot of stuff into, there's a lot of motion in each one. So so yes, it would make an outstanding Christmas gift, I'm thinking. So, you know, you guys should, I mean, you don't want to leave here, think how guilty you'll feel if you leave here with a lot of money in your pocket or your purse. So you will be able to, when we're done here to go over, you're going to be signing books.
We'll be signing books, that's right.
With lovely, probably lovely, thoughtful kind of veterinary. And you probably, I don't know, do you have a lot of veterinary jokes?
A lot of veterinary jokes. No.
Have you ever used this one where like say a cat person comes in with Fluffy,
Yeah.
and so you hold up the cat and go, and then charge them for a CAT scan?
Yeah,
So you do it. Said the day before.
In the Labrador, the lab result, right? The lab
Okay.
test, yeah, the lab test.
Oh, I did not know that one. So
The lab test, yeah.
I will do that on my vets. Yeah, it's like bagpipers. There's only like 2 jokes to cover them, so you guys have a lot in common. I think we're at the point we can actually do some audience questions. John, does that seem like part of our agenda here?
That seems like a wonderful part of our agenda. So I do have a microphone, which I will place in front of your face if you put up your hand. And if you're watching online and have a question, please just write it in the chat. Were there any local questions?
You know what, as I said, you thought I was joking that you won't be allowed to leave, but I demand some, I can tell by looking at you, not just a nice looking audience, but you're also a very thoughtful audience, you know, so there must be something you could even ask, like I'm dying to ask him about, you know, like questions about my dogs, like, should I be worried about these lungs? But I'm holding off, it's your turn now, so ask, you know, like what it's like to be a vet that tells stories. How does he see? I want to know how he finds it. What if you ask how he finds the time to do it? Because I don't know how you know, like you got to have your TV time on the couch, and if you have dogs, you got to, you know. But you're one of those guys. Right? You just can't sit. You can't sit still. He's got to be doing something. You would never take him to like Hawaii because he would not relax on the beach, right? Okay, looking at the crabs and saying, something's wrong with this crustacean.
More or less.
Look, I will give you like a very unpleasant look. I could randomly pick, I've done this before at the ballet, I did all the pre-show chats, and I would just randomly select someone and force them to ask a question. Would you guys like it if I did that? Because I will.
Oh, there's one.
Oh, there we go, hand went up. By the way, it should be a good question too.
What's the most unusual animal you've ever worked on?
Ooh, so yeah, no, that is a good question. Yeah, it depends on what you mean by unusual. I guess when I've been asked this before, every time I come up with a different answer, and the one that pops into my head is just at random is a lionfish that was brought to me from a pet shop down the road, and she brought it in an ice cream bucket. And a lionfish, for those of you that don't know, is this thing that looks like it's got feathers sticking out of it. It's highly toxic fish, highly poisonous fish. So it had attempted but failed to swallow a catfish. So there was a catfish tail coming out of the mouth of the lionfish. And so she comes and says, "Phil, can you help me here? This stupid catfish got itself struck me as unclear which fish was more stupid in this scenario, but anyway, and she didn't tell me that it was really poison. I just knew that it was really.
Yes.
I've been in the Caribbean. I know what this is. This is not a good thing. I'm not touching this. I'm sorry. But so I made a.
You made them touch.
We had yeah, that's right. Jasmine, come here.
Yeah.
String this fish for me. So we had just been doing renos, and so we had some of that quarter round left over that to use on molding. So I've got 2 pieces of quarter round to use as kind of giant chopsticks to hold the lionfish steady.
Like
and then
sushi.
got forceps. Yeah, like sushi. That's right. Apparently they're good eating. And then used forceps to yank the catfish out of the lionfish mouth, and the catfish did not survive the procedure. I think it probably was dead.
I think he was, I thought he was a goner.
But the lionfish was fine.
Yeah,
I don't remember what I charged for that.
and you didn't get, like don't they have like prickly things?
Yeah, but they look like
So
feathers.
if you
like
step
they're-
on them, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, don't touch them, don't step on them, don't handle them.
Good advice from a vet.
So lionfish, yeah, that's up there as one of the more unusual animals.
That was an excellent question. You will be allowed to leave the store. Okay, more of you have questions. You have stories. You have nothing but stories to share. So you probably, have you written the lionfish story yet?
Yeah, it's in the first book.
It's in the very first book.
It's called Fish of Death.
Yeah.
Well, fish of extreme pain is more accurate. I don't think they kill you
Fish of
unless you're very small.
No. Get a bunch of them. But, group together. Oh, there we have
Perfect.
another question.
And we do have 2 questions online as well, so.
Oh, great.
How do you keep track of all the stories?
Yeah, I've got a kind of a freakishly good memory, so that's helpful. I've probably forgotten lots though. Like I keep being asked. So after the first book, there's publishers right. Okay, so when's the second book? I said, no, I'm done. These are all my stories. I'm sorry, but then I started thinking, okay, there was that, and there's this other thing. So then we had How to Examine a Wolverine, and okay, that is it. I'm absolutely done. But different things will trigger those memories, and then okay, there was one more. So we've got the third book, and I think I'm really done at this point. But you never know.
Kind of hard for us to believe that.
So, yeah, I mean, most of them are fairly vivid things. I mean, so if you think 32 years in practice, and I see 10 to 20 appointments a day. I'm not working full time now, 3 days a week, but when I was working full time, you do the math on that. There are thousands and thousands of interactions, 99% of which don't generate an interesting story. So the interesting ones do stand out.
Well, we have one clever one heavy and one rather whimsical question. So the heavy one is, have your travel plans changed since recent climate predictions from Glenn?
Okay, that's out of left field. Fair question, I suppose. Yeah, I do. I still have got family in Germany, and one of my hobbies is long distance walking in the UK, which is kind of a weird specific thing, but there we go. I like doing long distance trails in England, Scotland, and Wales. And so there were times, having accumulated a lot of aeroplan points, where it kind of zip back and forth because it's hard to get away for very long. So I go for 5 days to visit family and then come back and be here for a few months and go 5 days to do a walk. And now I bundle those trips. Does that answer your question, Glenn? But I try to be conscious of that. I walk to work. It's 6-7 kilometers. So most of the time anyway.
And someone you may know who goes by the name Expecto Patronem starts off by saying, "Hi, Papa." Was the snow leopard more or less ferocious than Lily?
Oh yeah, so Lily so that's my daughter, and we're Tasquin. Hello, Nico. Lily was more ferocious, but Lily's become quite tame relatively now, whereas I hadn't seen the snow leopard since then, but I presume it's gotten more ferocious, so it's kind of sort of different kind of arcs of ferociousness.
And we do have time for one more question, so right over here.
I'm just wondering, how satisfying was it to write about your family during the war in Germany?
Yeah, it was satisfying. It also was, it was important to me. It felt, my father passed away quite a long time ago. He died in 1994. So he had all these stories when I was a kid and a teenager, and like a typical teenager, maybe I'm gonna say it's typical. Yeah, Dad, you suffered in the war, or whatever. It's like fine. I'm gonna hear these stories again and again. So I was kind of half paid attention. So I felt a duty when he wasn't able to write his memoirs because he died too soon to do that for him. So that was the idea, and to give people some insight into what life was like for German civilians, and to show, so I have German friends, and to say a lot of people that I know in the German community, their family was in the resistance. Fine, I'm sure some of them were, but some of them were actually Nazis, like my grandfather was a Nazi, right? So fine, I'm not ashamed of it. I mean, it's just the historical reality. It's just the facts, just is what it is. And so I wanted to demonstrate that, show and who these people were and where this came from and how extremism can arise from. These are not kooky people. These were, regular, smart, educated people that got led astray, right? So that's I had a lot that I wanted to unpack with that. And also my dad was autistic. In retrospect, it's quite clear he was autistic, Asperger's. And so I wanted to show the potential of somebody like that, because he was quite heroic. As a 15-year-old, he led his family out of East Germany. They ended up in the Russian zone. My grandfather, as a Nazi, of course, was in a prisoner of war camp. So my father led his younger brothers and sisters and his mother, who was not in a really state to lead, across the Russian lines in 1949. So.
It was a very interesting book, very well written.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
That must make you feel good.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I feel it's lots of mixed emotions. Like there are elements of the family that in Germany that aren't delighted, expose the family's dirty laundry. I mean, not everybody in Germany is super open about the Nazi past.
Hey, I was never allowed to name my wife in my column for like 20 years. I think I understand.
Yeah. So it's complicated, but. Yeah.
Are there anybody else with a question that we can sneak in under the wire here? I think we're getting close to it. John, are you hiding something?
That was actually our last question for the evening. So if you folks had any closing comments you might like to offer, I can talk about the sign.
I will give you the last word. I just want to say that I was excited to meet you, and you did not disappoint at all. You are someone who has not just a wealth of stories, but you have a special gift that everybody has stories. Not everybody knows how to tell their stories. So you can smile at this part because this and you're able to tell them in a way that people can relate to. It makes them laugh, it makes them cry, and to make people feel emotion. What a wonderful thing. And you'll notice, and we didn't say a whole word this time about the pandemic, which
Okay. There's a bunch of pandemic stories.
There is some pandemic stuff in there. So, but thank you very much for doing what you do. I'm looking forward to reading the other books now. So I really adore this. And I'm not kidding. I get him to sign it and give it as like Christmas gifts to people. Or I think
No, thank you, Doug. I really appreciate it.
So, all right, I'm going to sit down and let you talk.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming. A round of applause for Doug Speirs, please, as well. Given all his time to come and promote a random stranger's work.
Not anymore, we're best friends. I'll be over for dinner.
And thank you all for coming. I'm sure there were much more interesting things that were going on television and so forth. So
I tried. So.
Okay.
No.
You'll be able to buy your book and you design some lovely, humorous and emotional things.
That's right, I'll draw cartoons as well.
And if you wish, Philip, to inscribe wonderful and humorous, lovely and deeply heartfelt things in your book, he will be at a table just beside our cash desk in just a moment. So we'll just transport him over there and I'll let you know when he's all set up and then you can come over to join us. Basically, it's quite simple. We have copies of all of his books here. We have copies of all 3 of the Accidental Veterinarian books, both at the table and behind our cash desk. You can get a book signed before you pay for it, although we do recommend paying for the book before you leave the store. So please do feel free to ask one of my colleagues for them or just pick one up when you're in the signing line and then bring it to the cash desk afterward. We're so delighted that ECW Press has published yet another book in this series. We're always so pleased whenever we see them pop up in their catalog. And we're delighted to hear that there are more to come. We're also so very grateful to Doug Speirs for hosting the event as well. That was completely wonderful to have you behind the microphone. Once again, Doug, thank you kindly. And so grateful to all of you for joining us here, both physically and virtually as well. So much gratitude to all of you. And I'll ask you all to please join me one more time in acknowledging Dr. Philipp Schott.